Good morning, everyone. So today I'm going to be talking to you about the future of payments. First, let me just say that I'm honored to be here with all of you. To talk about the future of payments itself, I'm going to use a paradigm that I think that all of you recognize and realize, but I'm just going to remind you a bit of what those paradigms are. It's the one that the largest transformations in technology, in experiences, and disruptions that I've seen have been either through the replacement or removal of something. I'll just start with a couple of examples in history and then go on to the aspects that relate to payments itself. When the automobile revolution first started, we didn't know what the concept of a car was. We actually took something that existed at that point in time, the horse carriage. We removed the horse from the horse carriage. In fact, we used to call it the horseless carriage. At that point in time, we started to develop it from there. And what it did for transport was that it went from something where the horses had to take rest, you could only do certain kinds of distances, certain kinds of speeds, and so on, and it let you travel more at higher speeds and things of that nature. The paradigm that I'm going to be using all the way through, that the transformation is actually about the removal of something that existed. To illustrate this further with a different example, let me take the coming in of the phones. Alexander Graham Bell invented the phone. With the coming in of the phone, people didn't need to use the transport anymore. They could now communicate, whether it was with the family or for business, or for that matter, anything. In the beginning, phones existed maybe in a certain location in the town, and you went to make a call there. Over time, it became a commodity, and the phone moves into the house. But even with the phone moving into the house, it's probably placed in a little corner, and you head to that little corner. There's a little wire that's tethered to it. You sit close to it and do the phone call, which means making a phone call by itself was a chore. It was a task. You scheduled a phone call. The first change we made is to make those cords a little more flexible so we could move around, so you could be cooking and making a call and things of that nature. Over time, we removed that cord itself, and it became a cordless phone. And the cordless phone allowed you to move around the house and take a call and do the call no matter what you were doing at that point in time. The communication revolution not only helped us connect better with our families, do our work faster, but it helped with so many other things, all the way up to even real-time war strategies and such. We then moved into the next revolution, where we replicated the wireless phone at home to work no matter where you went with the mobile phones. Granted that in the beginning, the form factor of a cell phone was almost like a briefcase. But over time, you got it to a place where now it is extremely small. And the last transformation in phone was the one where we said the phone is not a device anymore. It's an application on a different device that can do many other things. Many of you remember, maybe even just a decade ago, that you probably owned a phone, you owned a GPS, you owned a camera, you owned a video camera, and things of that nature. And all of that have gone away. If you were to collect all those things and put it on one side, and put the cell phone on the other side, which does everything that you did with all that, you'll see a comparison in reduction of size and portability and convenience and things of that nature. So these are paradigms, but I'm going to now use these paradigms to talk about the future of payments. The first aspect, as you all know, is cashless. In 1950s was the first time a credit card was actually released. Diner's card was out there in the 1950s. In 1958, American Express got into that journey. For the first time, people didn't have to move around with cash. They could now use a card. The first generation of cards, by the way, were specific only to a certain store. But over a period of time, the cards could now be used anywhere you went, in any store. Standards started to emerge, and more people got into this business. Cashless was now possible. And in fact, cashless is growing in a big way, particularly in Asia. Year-over-year growth in Asia is now at 29%, the fastest anywhere in the world. Sweden expects that by 2023, it'll be fully cashless. And I'm confident with everything that I've seen, including the conversations I had on this trip to India with my buddies, they're using cash less and less and less. So it's only a matter of time that we go entirely cashless. So cashless was the first thing, the removal of cash. We'll actually then move to the revolution in the mid-90s. The internet had matured. It had now started to become the place that people went to for communication, for content, and now for commerce. Till this happened, you went to the store. Now the store started to come to you. Suddenly, a small merchant anywhere in the world could connect with every shopper in the whole world. And for a consumer, the internet became an unlimited shelf of goods that they could buy from. Access was no longer an issue. Commerce just became easy. Granted, in the beginning, it was very rickety. Things didn't work. Connectivity was an issue. Payments didn't work all the time. Fraud and risk was hard to detect in the beginning, and so on. But the innovation we did with that to now a point where it is actually trustworthy. You do a lot of shopping on the internet, and we build trust over time. And I'll talk about trust in just a little bit. So while we took out the effort in commerce and payments, one thing started to emerge. While we made it convenient for people, the beginning of the mobile revolution itself, particularly in the mid-2000s, in the 2008 kind of time frame, is we said, you know, what if you started to eliminate the cards? How many of you, many of us still, probably carry a lot of different cards? We use cards situationally. What if it all went into a form factor as simple as a mobile phone? That's exactly what we do today. So we started to go cardless. Just for the record, PayPal was one of the first companies to actually start the revolution on cardless. I don't know how many of you know, but in the late 90s, we started off as a company that wanted to send money between Palm Pilots, beaming money between Palm Pilots. We very soon realized that there was not a business model for that. We shifted to sending money over email. And very soon, we started to build online checkout, first with eBay, and then with all the merchants in the world. So cardless is already here and progressing along as well. Before I go any further, one of the key things that I want to bring up is that there is actually a little bit of separation in terms of who has access and who doesn't have access. Well, most people in the room here are most likely seeing these trends and you're going, this is obvious. I've seen this before. I'm using it right now. But there is a large group of people in the world who don't have access. And this is what we consider the underserved community. And collectively, some of the work that we have to do is, how do you take these technologies and make it easier, cheaper, better, so that the whole globe could use it? Not just the few, not just the many, but all, okay? Now, while this started to happen and convenience started to grow, there was a key thing that was happening in the background. You made it easy for good people to do good things on the internet with connectivity. It also became easy for bad people to do bad things with that connectivity as well. Whether we talk about cybersecurity and cyber criminals, all the way from a bored college student who's trying to hack a site from their dorm, all the way up to cyber terrorism and criminals who made an enterprise out of cybercrime, there is a lot that we as companies have to pay attention to and figure out, because all of us are in the business of trust. The number one thing that we have to do for our customers is ensure that they feel safe and secure. So the number one thing is, how good are you with cybersecurity? And it's important to not only pay attention to cybersecurity, but actually invest in it to where it becomes a competitive advantage in the space. Second is fraud and risk. If you're not continuously evolving, particularly both with cybersecurity and fraud and risk, one thing to keep in mind is good today is not good enough tomorrow. That's the race that we are all in. So we apply a lot of work in terms of like taking the transaction data that we have in a very private way and applying that to making every transaction safe and secure for our customers. And that's what all of us have to do. Risk and regulations and such. We have to ensure, like we are in 200 markets and 100 different currencies. Every jurisdiction has laws on money. Every law is an obligation you have to follow. You have to build systems that take these obligations, digitize them, and ensure that a transaction is compliant no matter what corridor they happen in, locally within a market or across the markets as well. And there's so much more to do here. But I would say that most of us have probably paid way too much attention to the concept of loyalty with the customer. I think what we need to start to do is pivot that to focusing on trust. Loyalty can be bought and sold. Loyalty can shift from one provider to another. Trust, on the other hand, stays. And there's a lot that we can do in terms of digital systems and how we build experiences to make sure trust is upheld in a great way. At the same time, one of the challenges that we've had is that the currencies that we all operate in have been very siloed. There's the rupee in India, there's the dollar in the US, there's ruble in Russia, and so on. And now we have technologies that are available where you can actually consider starting to head towards the concept of one global digital currency. This is, to some extent, like early. There are advancements happening in this area. There is a lot of volatility in cryptocurrencies and things of that nature. But if all of us work together between customers, companies, governments, and regulators, eventually we can actually take currency and digitize it in a way that it becomes boundaryless. And at that point in time, you remove cash, you remove cards, you remove any effort, you remove any fear, you've removed all the boundaries. And at that point in time, payments starts to disappear. Payments becomes ambient. And actually, it has already started to happen. Let me give you an example. Most of you have taken an Uber ride or an Ola ride. When do you pay? Do you pay when you start the ride? Do you pay when you end the ride? The main thing that's happening, particularly in commerce and payments, is the whole concept of intent, purchase, and payment. Payment is beginning to go away. Intent and purchase is enough to assume a payment and make it happen. And this is the concept of ambient payments. We're already seeing it, whether it is through the example that I gave you, whether it is through subscriptions, which sometimes we have all these subscriptions that we don't want to pay for anymore, but is automatically happening. Payments is going into the background. Payments is going into the background, and it's becoming extremely convenient for the consumer. But on the other hand, the obligation that we have as payments companies is to ensure that everything to create a robust, safe, secure, reliable payments engine that is compliant across every single market is done in the background in an extremely strong way. That's the reason payments play, on the one hand, will be a user experience play, but on the other hand, will be a platform play as well. And this creates limitless opportunities. And when I say limitless, it's not in terms of just maximizing the ecosystem that we have today and the customers that are working with us today. But some of these paradigms will allow us to reach those segments that I talked about before. The segments that are underserved, that don't have access. Within PayPal, we talk about this concept of it's actually costly to be poor. Moving and managing money is harder for people who have lesser money. And between all of us here, governments around the world and regulators, we have the opportunity to remove those barriers and create a future where payments are truly limitless. They're boundaryless, they're global, and they can serve everyone, not just most, but everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to eminent speaker. Round of applause for him, ladies and gentlemen, once again. Thank you.